Hey everyone, we're going to get started here in just a minute. We're going to let people have a minute or two more to join, but we're looking forward to getting to talk to you all today. So we'll be back shortly.
Technical knowledge, and we have a lot of broad business knowledge, and our approach is to try to bring those things together.
There's like the HR talent experience team, and then there's the IT team, and they're always butting heads like this. Prime for siloed people, cliques, and people talking around each other, and there being rumors, so it doesn't feel like a cohesive team a lot of the time.
The team that's focused solely on traditional IT is not positioned well to help with how technology could be more strategically used in the business, right? They care about desktop support and making sure that the network is secure.
Giving them a tool doesn't make someone successful. Being able to use that tool to solve a business problem is what makes them successful.
Where we tend to focus is kind of that layer above, where we try to take all of those technology and those tools that you have as an organization and help you leverage them at that business user level, so that you're effectively accomplishing your mission in the most efficient way possible.
Because you want every employee, from a person who's managing an office all the way to somebody out in the field or even executive level, you want all of them to be working together.
How do we optimize them? How do we bring them into a technology world where it can do things for us instead of relying on a manual process?
What I care about is that you have the right tool for the job. And so to that end, we're going to evaluate that and tell you, no, don't do it with that tool. If you're able to use technology more effectively, the people that are supposed to be focused on the mission of the organization can actually do more missional things because the tech is handling the rest.
Having a successful outcome of the project, there's no question that we're going to do everything we can to make that happen. We set ourselves up as an organization that is our focus. That's our guiding light. And so it pervades everything we do. Bulb Digital helps organizations transform their business using technology.
We help businesses use technology better so that their people work better together.
All right, welcome everyone. Hey, here we are, November office hours.
Yep.
We made it. Welcome. If this is your first time joining, welcome to Office Hours. I'll give you a bit of a rundown on how this works. You're either seeing us through YouTube or through our Teams invite register only link. So if you're on YouTube, feel free to drop your questions in the chat. And if you're on Teams, we want to hear your questions as well. Drop those in the chat. That's kind of where we're going to be grabbing questions from. We do have a couple questions that people have already submitted ahead of time. But as we're talking, jump on the train of whatever topic we're talking about, add in your questions, or give a completely different work stream. So one thing I want to say before we dive in, technical questions are typically what we get deep into. However, all questions are welcome. We've had questions about communication. We've had questions about change management. We've had questions about new Microsoft tools like Loop. That's one of our favorites to talk about. So those are just a couple of ideas for items that you can ask us about. But of course, we do help people use technology. So if you have tech questions, you can ask us those as well. As we're doing some housekeeping here, I'd love for people to drop in the chat where you're joining from and what is the weather like where you're joining from today. We are joining from Grand Rapids, Michigan, and looking outside the window here.
It's a little gray, but warm.
It's gray and humid.
Yeah,
so
very
I
strange
don't know
right
November weather. Never really know. We've got someone in Nashville, and it's 80 degrees. Jealous. That sounds lovely, sitting here in Michigan. All right, definitely post that. We're always curious to hear where you guys are joining from. So again, office hours is something we do once a month, usually the first Wednesday of every month. Hopefully, if we don't have a holiday or something that messes up our timeline. So we'll be back here next month, December, whatever the first Wednesday is, and we'll be here to answer your questions. At Bulb Digital, we're here to help you modernize your workplace. So a lot of things fall under that umbrella, but ultimately how to use Microsoft 365 tools or other digital tools to streamline your business processes and align your people, so bringing your team together. That's what we're all about. Outside of that, I'm Emma. I'm a project manager here at Bulb Digital, and I've got Matt joining me. He's one of our co-founders and lead on a lot of different items, but specifically communication and collaboration tools. So with that, I think we should jump into our first question.
Yeah.
We have Warsaw. It's -1, they said.
Oh, boy. That's probably Celsius, though? Yeah?
Yeah, probably.
Okay. Yeah.
Still cold.
Yeah,
Still cold. Still very cold. Wisconsin, same as Michigan. Love it. Delaware is 70 degrees. Man, people are having nice falls.
Yeah.
It's wonderful. I've got a sister out in Colorado, and it just snowed there, so it's starting. Okay, let me pull up our first question here. This one got submitted pretty recently. So Lou writes, at my consultancy, we set up a Loop, a OneNote, group email list, and a Teams channel for our project work. Do you have any tips on how you all approach this? We're especially focused on making it easy for clients to reach us and for us to avoid asking for repeat info on and across projects for the same client. So it sounds like this is a consultancy. They're probably working with a number of different clients, which is actually our setup.
Yep.
So we're very well versed in this sort of setup of working. And they're trying to set up different Microsoft 365 tools like Loop and OneNote and Teams for project work. And they want to avoid having to repeat information and just make it more effortless. What are your thoughts, Matt?
Yeah,
I've got some thoughts too.
Yeah, so I mean the most streamlined way to work with someone that's external, that and I would only do this if we're going to be working with them long term. This isn't something I would do for someone, we have a week-long project or something like that, but you're going to be engaged with the customer for quite a long time. The best thing to do is to create a relationship or a link between your tenant, and assuming they have a Microsoft tenant, and their tenant. If you can do that, you can use something called shared channels. And in a shared channel, it really allows you to create that bridge, that gap between the two organizations, and it makes it really easy. The channel will actually show up right in their teams, just like it does for right next to all of their other teams. And it makes it really, really, really convenient to have a conversation. And we would usually do that as part of a team. So we'd create a team for either a customer or for a project. And then, there would be a channel for us for internal things that we're communicating on. And then there would be that shared channel. So that's kind of like the premium gold standard. Takes a little bit of effort to set up, but really brings that collaboration as tight as it possibly can be. The next level down for us would be, we'd create a team, and we would basically at that point choose if we wanted to invite someone into our team. And so they would be a guest within our team. And we would leverage Teams across the board as much as we can. We try to get rid of emails, especially, exactly for what you're talking about, where you're trying to, only ask a question once, have everybody on the same page, not have someone that's, been out for a day or two and kind of loses that context. So, and for us, doing it that way, using either a shared channel or a team where you invite them in, is by far the best way to do it. But it takes a little bit of extra work. It takes some working to make that happen. Do you want to share what we do with the shared folders, like the?
Yeah. So what Matt's talking about is that shared channel, like you're saying, the kind of the gold standard. If you're not going to go all the way and actually set things up so that your tenants are integrated, and you're going to just within your own tenant set up, I'll just give an example. So let's say we're working with your company. We're going to set up. Let's say it's what's the name of the paper business in the office? Why am I blanking out? Dunder Mifflin. Gosh,
Yeah.
that's my favorite show. let's say we're working with Dunder Mifflin. So we're going to set up a team called Dunder Mifflin Paper Company, and then we're going to set up a channel under that. Usually if it's just a small project and we don't have tons and tons of team members, we might just set up one channel, just use that general channel that's created or that first channel. And then you're going to have your posts, your files, and all your different tabs. Maybe you've got a planner set up, maybe you've got a loop set up, and you're going to link out to that. So once you have that kind of basic project structure, within files, you can actually set up a folder within that team that you're going to share out externally with the client. So you're only sharing a very small piece of what you have set up in that project team structure within your tenant. And then within that folder, you can drop things like PDF documents or meeting recordings or resources that you're trying to share. And it will all be shared through a really secure email verification link. So they'll have to verify that they're using the email that you provided the access to through that. And we should probably do a video, if we don't already have one, on our YouTube channel about how to set this up. I think we might have one.
We have a little bit.
Yeah,
it's not explicit, but yeah, we have a little bit.
Yeah.
And that's really good for scenarios where you want to be able to send information file-wise between organizations and not have it go through email. But it doesn't allow you to do chat messaging. So then you still are going to be using email for communication in that way.
But it does take care of a lot of the issues that we see of, well, I can't send them the recording because it's too big of a file, or I can't send this huge document because it's too big of a file,
or I don't know where you put the I don't remember where the link is to that file that you sent me one time.
Or I sent you it over email, but like this person was mentioning, I want to avoid having to ask for repeat info. So if you just bring it all together in that one folder, and you know that that's where they drop files and you drop files to them, it just makes it a single source of truth. So I think that would, that's really given me an idea, Lou. I think it'd be beneficial potentially for us to do a video on just how we set up, how we work with different clients and external parties. So we will take that to heart because other people have asked us about that as well. So good question. All right.
So we got a couple from Teams and from YouTube.
Okay.
The one from YouTube, Cynthia is asking, how do I set up a Teams for my workplace of 5? Is there a user-friendly tutorial for this? No, there's not a user-friendly tutorial, I don't think. And it's mostly because Teams is it's a tool that can do lots of different things. And so, it's the devil's in the details, right? The things that we would tell you, the things that we talk about a lot is topic-based communication is the most important thing. Teams and SharePoint are tools that allow for topic-based communication. And in your case, I would be highly looking at teams within a team, so channel communication. I would be looking to try to avoid group chats or group communications, and I would be focusing on channels. And so in a small organization like yours, that might look like a team for your organization. So everyone in the organization is part of that team, and they have access to all the channels. And maybe there's a channel for general, and we have some blog articles we can probably share about some example channel names and stuff. But like there might be a general where it's, hey, we're doing just chatting about whatever we want. And then, maybe who's coming in for the day, et cetera. And then maybe a random channel that is more, hey, random stuff that isn't really business related that you want to chat about. So there might be some channels there, but the key there is that everybody has access to it. And then we might suggest, maybe your organization works on special projects or has customer things. So there might be multiple channels after that have specific ways to communicate about a particular project. Yeah. So that's really what you would do. I noticed you said, it sounds too complicated. Maybe I could hire you guys. We're happy to talk to people about setting things up for them, making sure they have it set up right. It shouldn't be too complicated. The biggest challenges that we find isn't so much a technology problem as much as a mind shift problem. People are very familiar and used to email and individual communication. So they're used to thinking about talking to people and not talking about a topic. And you really need to change your mindset from that, from, hey, I need to talk to so-and-so about this problem, to I need to talk about this problem in this context. And that's where we see the biggest challenge.
Yeah. And Cynthia, I want to give you encouragement. It does feel complicated at first. I was newer to Teams just a few years ago, and I remember feeling like, okay, I don't know if this is worth all of the rigmarole. And it can feel like it's a lot of work to get set up. But like Matt's saying, the technology piece of it is actually somewhat simple in that you'll notice a lot of similarities between what you use your phone to text every day. Like those types of chats and digital tools that we love to use in our personal life are available to use in the business world through Teams. We just have to get it set up a little bit, like Matt's saying, with a different mindset. So it's not too complicated. It definitely is something that I think is approachable and people can definitely do. But it's that first mindset shift and just being able to experiment and take a stab at it. I think either Olivia or Mitch is posting some blogs in there. I think I wrote a blog recently that we have coming out all about setting up Microsoft Teams for project management. I think it also applies to setting up Teams just for regular work management. So thinking through your just regular day-to-day, everyday tasks. And we do have, to your point, Cynthia, we do have a service where we can come in and help you use Microsoft 365 for your everyday essentials, getting your work management set up, or Teams configuration. So we help companies who maybe they have 200 teams already set up and they're trying to distill how do we create and restructure and reorganize everything. We're more than happy to help with that as well. So we get it. It can be overwhelming, but I want to give you encouragement. You can do it. If I can do it, you can figure it out. I definitely did not know what I was doing a few years ago, but I've learned so much. All right, let's go to the next question here. What is the best way to set up a file organization for a new company? So structure Teams and SharePoint effectively. I like it. These are all kind of in line with the same topic. So this is from Jackie. Well, where do we want to begin? File organization for a new company. I think to Matt's point that he was just making is you want to think about how many teams you need within your new company because, well, you might disagree with me here. I think you should set up your file organization in Teams, not in SharePoint.
I mean, it depends on what you're talking about. On that particular topic, I would say every organization should consider having a SharePoint site for intranet, for an intranet type of solution, and Teams.
Yes.
And so for collaboration, it's Teams all day long. I would never set up my, some people think about using SharePoint as my replacement file share, and that's, no, don't do that.
Yeah.
Use Teams for that if at all possible. But I would also encourage people to consider having a SharePoint site that is for communication purposes.
Yep. So let's take the Dunder Mifflin example. You've got the sales team. You've got Jim, Dwight, Pam in later seasons, and they're all on the sales team, Phyllis. And they would have a team within Teams that would say sales, and then they might have some channels below that, and they would share all of their different files within Teams. Within those different channels, maybe they would just have the one channel, the one sales team. And then you would have your accounting team, so it could be divided by divisions, that's one way to do it. Or you could have just a full team that's going to be the entire Dunder Mifflin team, and then your different channels could be different teams within that. So there are a lot of different ways to approach it. But then if you think through what Matt's talking about, like your intranet, your SharePoint site, that's where you could post company news and actually have news articles within a SharePoint intranet. So depending on what you mean, Jackie, and I don't know if you want to follow up on that, if you're talking through maybe having an intranet and having SharePoint, or just starting to use Teams for collaboration.
Two things quick. I'll enable her microphone, but for everyone watching, get ready to screen grab. I'm going to throw up some slides from a workshop that we did about how to structure teams and channels. So this is the first one. So how you should create these things around organization, people that work together, project or initiative, or common discussions, and then philosophies behind them. Create them as wide as you can, create them as needed, create channels before Teams, use shared and private channels, etc. So feel free to pause, screen grab. Those are resources that we have available. And then I'm going to enable Jackie quick.
Yeah, Jackie, if you want to come off mute.
If she's interested. Otherwise,
if you're
feel free to.
interested in chatting a little bit further.
She did have a follow-up down below where she's asking, should I create a SharePoint for admin files
and Teams for projects and communication.
Communication. Okay, so yeah, her follow-up for those on YouTube who can't see, she had mentioned, oh, Jackie, you're off mute. I'll let you chat.
Go ahead. That's exactly kind of what you were describing at first is that, okay, any of that admin, how we run our business, HR files, accounting files, templates for people to go grab and then pull into whatever project they're working. So have that as kind of that SharePoint site. And then all of your day-to-day project work basically be that structure in Teams. So each project have a Teams, but should we have for all of those how you run the business, those HR files, those templates, would it be better to put that as a team? Because you're not really communicating. It's just go grab files. So does that belong on Teams? Does that belong on SharePoint?
It really depends on what you're really talking about. I mean, if you're saying that those files are just read-only for people, they're just trying to go grab that thing and use it one time, that would be more a SharePoint thing, right? That is, so there's communication and collaboration, and the terms are a little bit confusing because sometimes when we say communication, we're also talking about like chat messaging. But in the case that we would be talking about here, communication is a communication from a small group of people. So leadership, HR, etc., right? Like, so people within the organization to everyday employees, everyday managers, right? If that's the type of thing you're trying to communicate that out, that's SharePoint all day long, because that allows you to create this model very easily where you have readers who have access to a particular page. It's the traditional employee portal of kind of situation, right? If you're talking about we need to collaborate on those documents, we have a new, it's the end of the year, we've got new benefits coming out. I want to be able to upload new versions of that and collaborate on what the messaging might be around that. That should all be in Teams, because that is where you can really collaborate on all of that stuff, make that happen. So that is really the differentiation. That's how we differentiate the two. There's a lot of nuance to that. There's a lot of reasons why people might use Teams or use SharePoint, even though it is a collaboration purpose. There are some scenarios, but generally speaking, if you're just starting out, you've never done this stuff before, SharePoint, we call it an intranet. We have a whole podcast about an intranet and what that means. I can even, Mitch, I'm gonna try to do this without giving away too much at the moment. But I can even share our intranet and what we have that I think might help clarify some of this. So give me just a second here, and I'll
that could be helpful.
In another
and to
spot.
be totally honest with everyone listening, I feel like we kind of do both ourselves. Like sometimes,
100%.
we have things within a general Bulb Digital admin file share within Teams, and then we also have an intranet.
Yeah,
so
100%.
depending on the piece of content, it sometimes does make sense to have it in either. And we're a pretty small team too, so we actually have both.
Yeah, so we invest a lot in this. Obviously, this is what we do. I don't know, Mitch, if you want to share, but like this is our intranet, right? And so this is all like news content. That's like the fancy stuff that shows up here. But there's actually a bunch of file stuff. So for example, if I go under file and benefits, you can see what's going on for payroll. And this is payroll information, how you get that stuff. And there's documents, ACH form, like all of that stuff. So we have a mix of those things in here, but this is what we would call a portal, right? We've got our employee handbook information listed out here, right? That's what this stuff is. However, in Teams, which I'm not going to show you because I don't think I have a good way to show that without restricting some things off the cuff. But in Teams, we have an HR team, right? And that HR team is really like talking about benefits, talking about those things, storing those files related to that. We have a sales team that's storing sales-related content and collaborating on sales-related things. But we also have content here that's related to that, like news about sales and things that are going on for HR, et cetera. So that's how we see the world, as having those two things. And that is the delineation that we see. If Emma and I should both have, generally speaking, the same access to the files, and we should be able to both edit it, everybody should be able to. That is collaboration. That is Teams. Teams is the perfect place to do that.
But if you're trying to do that one-to-many, then
I like Tanya's call out of Teams is where you create what you share on the SharePoint intranet.
Correct.
Yep. I mean, this is going to be a question for later, Matt, and this could be a podcast topic, but should every company have a SharePoint intranet? You don't have to answer that now. But that's right. That's an interesting question.
I have an answer.
Up.
The answer is every company can benefit from an intranet.
Yeah.
I don't know whether or not every company is willing to invest what it takes to have an intranet.
That's a great answer.
That is my response to that.
Awesome. All right. And it looks like Jackie says, excellent. Exactly what I was thinking. Thank you so much. Glad we could help you. All right. I'm going to see if we can scroll back up to see where our next question is.
Saw another question, the loop one I thought was really interesting.
Yeah. Someone asked, what is the main purpose of a loop? Great question.
I think it's a great question.
Yes. Yeah. I will answer first.
Go ahead.
So when we're talking about Loop, Loop is an app, and it's technically a workspace. When you say what is a loop, it's either a workspace or it's a loop component. Both are created within this Loop app. And I would say loop, if you've heard of the phrase like, let me loop you in, I'm pretty sure that's where the name came from. But the purpose of a loop is to create a area of text that you can share really seamlessly and collaborate on seamlessly with all of your different coworkers or with external users, and be creating content all at once, and everyone else can be typing and you can be typing and everyone gets to see what's going on in a really seamless and effortless way. So I would say Loop creates this sort of collaborative working space that's similar to OneNote, if you've ever used OneNote before, but it has a lot more powerful tools within it. You can create tables, you can surface things like Planner, you can grab tasks down and track tasks, and a bunch of other things. But it kind of takes what people love about OneNote, where you're just it's a digital notebook, and combines it with the power of collaboration as well as a lot of other different tools and just organization of thoughts. So that is my take off the cuff on what I think a loop is. Or
what are some of the ways we use it, like in our work day? What do we use it for?
So I think of Loop as a very powerful digital notebook. I use Loop to capture all of my meeting notes whenever I go to meetings. I use it to jot down agenda items. I use it to share out information in meetings. I use Loop to brainstorm with team members. I use Loop when I'm tracking tasks, creating task lists during a meeting. So-and-so says they're going to do it. I assign them a task within the Loop page or Loop workspace that I'm in. So I use Loop for just about everything to do with my job as project manager. It's kind of a multifaceted tool. What do you think the purpose of Loop is?
I mean, it's very similar to what you're talking about. I mean, at its core, Loop is a tool that allows for real-time collaboration on content that has advanced and integration with a bunch of different tools. And so if you want to share my screen, Mitch, like I get asked this question a lot, and it's really hard to explain without providing examples. And so, I'm going to do this right now, and then if people think it's good. I think I just explained
it pretty well without providing examples. But it's really hard to actually visualize it, because I'm glad you're going to show. This is going to be good.
I mean, it's hard to know until you start using it.
Yeah,
I think.
know.
So I'm going to give some real examples, some real world examples that I have experienced in organizations that don't allow Loop, for example, that I'm like frustrated that they don't allow Loop, which I think is probably the quintessential, like that's what people really want to know, is like what in the real world. So let's say that I'm in a test tenant, this Ligu person, I am maybe working with them, and I need to create, we're working on a message, right? Like we're like, hey,
need to send an email to a client.
What about, right? And I maybe write some long bit of text, some whatever that is, right? If he wants to respond to that and say, hey, like I don't like that, I want to do something different, it's very difficult for him to do anything, right? Mm-hmm. However, if I were to come in here and say Loop, and I were to add a Loop paragraph, and I said, in the messaging at the top, I said, right? If I said send it to customer, and I put, whatever that is in here, right? Whatever that text in, if I press enter, it's actually not a message anymore. This is actually an interactive component, right? So if Emma were to log in as Ligu, she could then go and modify this, or after the fact, let's say I want to modify this, I can go, no, I want to change this, right? So this is going to be something different. Every time I change this, it's automatically updated for everyone else, right? So even though this transforms a message that you just are sending into something more than just a message, it transforms it into a piece of content that you can go and edit and maintain and do something more on, right? You can do the same thing in Outlook. So I could send an email to someone that includes a loop component. And what I'm really doing behind the scenes is I'm creating a file, in this case in my OneDrive, because this is in chat, and then sharing that out with Ligu, and then Ligu can make changes to that. But it's also my thing. I can also take a link to this and share it with other people and have more locations. So it just extends out. And so this is loop components.
Right.
And then what Emma talked about was loop app, which builds on loop components and says, well, this is all fine and good, but now I want a space where, like, this is about a particular customer. Instead of doing this in a chat, why can't I just come in here and have this is the loop app, and why don't I just have a brand new workspace for customer A?
If you've ever used Google Docs, that's your experience of working in a document where you can all be, editing and everything at the same time, that's kind of the most similar thing, I think, to this. Or if you've, edited something in Word that's shared on SharePoint. That's sort of the feeling you get, but it's in a way less formatted space. If you're completely new to Loop, that's how I would
way
describe
less
it.
customizable thing,
Yeah.
right? So in this case,
But in a good way.
In a good way,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
Like, one of the problems with Word is that people spend way too much time deciding what font they want, and that somebody else doesn't like the font, and then they want something different, and you want to change the formatting to be this, and I
Simplify.
this is like, no, there's one way to do it because it's about the content. It's not about the display.
Right.
And so we're really, like, for example, here, I could have a thing that says, message to customer, right? And then I could have that same thing here, and this is like a page of stuff that I have. And I can have sub-pages, and I can have, but not only content, so we just did some basic content, I can create a table.
Yep.
And this table is not just a simple table. I can insert, and I can sort, and I can rename, and I can...
Show inserting a task list, because I want to answer, there's another question here, of hello from Greece. It's common to work at the same time many tasks during the day. Is there a tool which works with Planner that will help me keep track of the time I spent on each task? Okay, little different question, but definitely a good one. As far as keeping track of tasks during the day that works with Planner, Loop also works with Planner, which is the point I wanted to make here. It creates planner boards right within Loop, or you can pull in planner boards into your Loop workspace and surface those there and view tasks.
And so you can do tasks, you can do Kanban boards, you can do like just tables, you can do, like, there's a bunch of stuff, and it's just simple. It's simple to do, it's easy to do, it's, it takes all of the burden off from you in, I got to create a Word document, and where do I want to store it, and what do I want it to be? No, I have a workspace, and the workspace can contain multiple of these pages, and I manage the permission at the top level for that workspace. And if I want to have dynamic content, I can have dynamic content. If I want to have, static content, I can have static content. If I want to embed images, cool. If you want to, there's just so much that you can do with it related to this. We've moved pretty much any sort of collaboration that we might have out of Word and PowerPoint and all of those things into the Loop workspace, right? So for us, that is our go-to for all sorts of collaboration in that way.
Yep.
That was pretty long. I don't know if there is anything else you want to know about that, but
yes. Same person. So is it possible to integrate data from Loop with Power Apps
and Power Automate?
Yeah.
So Loop is built on SharePoint embedded, and so that you can get some integration between the two. It depends on what you mean by data, right? Like, so I just created this. This is a task list. This actually lives in Planner. And can you integrate Power Apps into Planner? Yes, you can. So in this case, yes. If you talk about the words that I put on a page here, not really, right? When you think about tables, not not especially. So it depends on what you're talking about related to data. It's less that you would integrate with data that's in Loop, and more that Loop integrates with other tools that have native integration with Power Apps and Power Automate.
Yeah. Okay, I know Tanya's got a comment there too, but I want to go back to that question about the task tracking and tracking time associated with tasks. We use a tool called Harvest for our time tracking. We're consultants, so we bill time, and we have to, divide time amongst projects. I love Harvest. I think it's one of the best that we've used. We did just do a project with a client, and we looked a little bit more into QuickBooks time. So if you use QuickBooks Online and you're looking for a time tracking tool that corresponds well, integrates really well, obviously their time tool works well. We might even look at using it in our own company. But in those tools, it often lets you just start timers or set different amounts of time that you want to use on different tasks. So time tracking tools definitely would do that. I don't know if there's one within the Microsoft 365
There's not one that's within Microsoft 365 suite that would allow you to track time. I think the way that you're looking to track time, both DevOps and Planner Premium have an option to say how much time you spent on a task, but that's not really for the purpose of time tracking. It's really meant for capacity planning and planning for future tasks. So knowing how much it took on a particular task versus what the expected effort was, so you could future plan that work.
Yeah.
So it really depends on what you're trying to do and what you're trying to get out of it.
Yeah, great question though, and awesome that you're using Planner to keep track of all of your tasks. And I think it is really good when people want to time box and think through, like you're saying, I thought that this would take me 4 hours, it ended up taking me 8, and then learning from that so that you can get better on your estimates. So that's great. That's go you. Keep doing that work. Okay, other feedback. I like that Tanya's bringing up the other point that we've made about Loop, that you can use Loop as a presentation tool. You can actually share your screen, and we use it almost the same way as PowerPoints. We think the formatting is that good. One good point that she brought up, though, is I'd be worried about workspace creep and duplication. So it needs a strategy, too. And I did write a blog, I think, about this at some point. I've put it in words, but you should create, in my video on Loop, I talk about mirroring the way you create your Loop workspaces to the way that you create your teams. And hopefully in the future, we have been told that there should be closer integration between Teams and Loop. That should be coming hopefully in the next year. But those two things should integrate more closely. But as of right now, they're not technically connected. So it's much easier to just mirror the structure of the two. So when you create a new Microsoft Teams team, you should also create a Loop workspace and vice versa. So kind of have those. And the way I loosely link them, I show this in the video, is I just use the tab at the top of your Microsoft team, choose website, and then link your Loop workspace right there through a URL. So I hope that helps think through the structuring of it. But yes, you should not just go create Loop workspaces without a structure. Good call out, Tanya. All right, I'm looking back through the questions here. What other questions do you all have? Put them in the chat. We are happy to answer. We want to hear from you. We want to hear what you're working on. Did we get all of the ones, Matt?
I think we got most of the questions, yeah.
There was one from earlier last month. I can pull it up that I don't think we had time to get to last time. So let me pull that up. I do see that Craig is.
While you're doing that, Tanya also said or asked, can you create start and end time fields in Planner and get at those for time tracking?
Yeah, so Planner Basic Planner, which is what most people have, doesn't have the ability to have a start and end time. As far as I know, it's just start and end date, and you can't do custom fields. So if you wanted to do that, you would need to go to Planner Premium, and Planner Premium already has some of that same stuff, and it has a field that is the effort that was spent on a particular task, and all of that data is stored in horsepower in Dataverse. So then, yes, you would be able to get access to all of those. So.
Okay. All right, so this one was submitted, like I said, I think it was right after our last office hours. So we did not have time to get to it. We just didn't have the question yet. So this one's from Craig. It says, why hasn't Microsoft 365 offered a preview capability in OneDrive for .rtf files? RTF is a relatively basic file format with modest formatting property options versus Microsoft Word with way more formatting property options. And PDF preview is supported, which can contain any number of formatted content properties.
Yeah, I would
Matt,
guess
what do you think?
I would guess it's mostly because RTF isn't used very much. Lots of people use PDF. Lots of people use a lot of the other file formats. I know Microsoft has added a bunch of viewers in the last, I don't know, 2-3 years for a bunch of different file formats, text files, for example, and some other file formats. But they, I would guess that it's just a usage thing. I would imagine in my experience, most people either use text files or they use PDF or Word or one of the more advanced file formats. RTF is just not a hugely popular or utilized format, would be my guess, but I don't really know.
Yeah. Interesting. This one was also from Craig. He says, is it safe to use the leave option within a Teams meeting without risk of exiting the associated chat session for that Teams meeting? For past office hour sessions, I allowed the meeting to auto-terminate so I don't lose the chat discussion. I see others leaving at the conclusion, and I would also only if I was confident the chat wouldn't close as a result. Thank you. I'm not a good one to ask because every time I leave meetings, I end the meetings because I'm usually the meeting facilitator.
Even when she shouldn't end them, she ends them.
I've cut people off before by accident because it's just like muscle reflex. You choose the end meeting.
So what exactly is the question?
So I think the question is it safe to use just the leave a meeting without the risk of exiting the associated chat session?
Yes. When you do leave and the meeting is still going, you still have access to the chat messaging, with the exception of if your tenant has things configured. So you can configure things in the tenant. For example, a new feature that's coming out is to say, stop anyone from accessing a meeting chat outside of the actual meeting itself, for example. But most people shouldn't have that enabled. It's not a common thing to do. So that is just you're still going to get access to the chat. Sometimes it could be muted depending on were you forwarded the meeting, were you actually an attendee on the meeting? Like there's a bunch of complications to it, but generally speaking, you still have access to the chat.
Okay, that's good. I guess I haven't had that situation happen to me where I've lost access to a chat ever, but it sounds like that might be the fear here. But
Tanya mentioned something here that she mentions that meetings go on for days. So Tanya, the organizer needs to end meetings instead of leaving meetings. That is the answer to that problem. You have to be an organizer to do it, but when you end a meeting, and to do that, when you're in the meeting itself, there's a little drop down next to the leave button when you can do it, and when you click that drop down, there's an end meeting. When you do that, it forcibly kicks everyone out of the meeting. Yeah. So if you have somebody, because I see this all the time in certain customers where you have a 50-person meeting, you're doing whatever you're doing, you get done with the meeting, everybody leaves, but the person who was never really paying attention in the first place, or maybe their screen went black and went to sleep, and then they walked away to do lunch, and then they're doing lunch for 2 hours, and then they come back and they're still in the meeting. That prevents all of that stuff. It forcibly ends the meeting.
This gives me a great chance to share with everyone that I'm actually doing a webinar on meetings, all about meetings. We've heard a lot of feedback from all of you that project management is something you want to get better at using Microsoft 365 tools. So we've created a webinar targeted at this topic specifically to meetings. And in that, I hope to share some of those tips and tricks, like in a Teams meeting, always make sure you're actually hitting the leave and you're not choosing the leave button, but you're choosing the end the meeting for everyone, because otherwise it messes up your meeting recordings. Then your meeting recording will be like 4 hours long. So there's definitely these little tips and tricks if you are a meeting facilitator that you can take to make your meetings more effective. And I want to share those with all of you. I've learned them over the last couple of years, and I want to share that out so other people have them. We'll drop a link so you can register for that webinar if you're interested. and drop questions for me too. So I'm preparing all the content for that right now and would be happy to hear what people want to know about meetings.
Yep. So another one that we can take would be you have bookings, resources you can, or use cases you can share. So we don't use bookings internally, primarily because it doesn't have, what's that feature called?
Do you want me to do this one?
If you want to.
Like the
collective
Yes.
book calendars or collective
collective booking. Yeah, Bookings doesn't have a collective feature, whereas Calendly, which is the tool that we use, does. So for us, it's all about giving out our team's availability in a collective sense. So when someone wants to schedule with us, I don't want them to just see Emma's calendar or just Matt's calendar. I want them to see the overlap between Matt's calendar and Emma's calendar and when we're both going to be available, and our conference room was available too. So I will send a Calendly link that's a collective booking that has conference room, Matt, Emma on it, and it will only show the times that you can schedule where the three are aligned, and then that person can schedule and make a choice based on their calendar. Bookings currently, to the best of my knowledge, does not have that feature, and so it's much more difficult, especially when booking with external, which is what you would typically use it for. Otherwise, you'd just be using Outlook internally, most likely. It doesn't have that, and that's really our biggest pain point. We want to be able to give a team's worth of availability out, not just a single person. So we don't use bookings. But if you're only trying to book with one person one-on-one or just your schedule to a group, it could work for that.
Or allowing a round robin kind of approach, or a approach with the next available resource. It works for lots of different things, but we very, very often want to simplify scheduling with customers where they, so the other thing is collective booking only works.
Oh, go
What's
ahead.
that?
Keep going. I've got a use case though that it would work well.
Collective bookings, the reason it's useful, it's only useful when you have one organization trying to book with another organization. It falls down when you have 5 different groups of people that no one can see the other people's calendars. It becomes still a problem, right?
Yeah.
But that other approach is really great for us. When we work with one other company, we can just send that link. They can go look up and see when their people are already, and they can schedule with us.
Bookings works great when, say, you have a bunch of hairstylists and they have schedules, and you can say these people are available at this time. Come grab a time slot and show up.
Or a sales
it's
call.
One person. Yep.
Or this was a use case my husband was using Bookings for. He was saying, I need to schedule with 10 different directors within his organization. They need to find time with me. So I'm going to just send out a link that has my calendar, or include that in my monthly email and say, here's my Bookings link. Go ahead and book time with me. Yep. So it's any time that it's kind of like the one to many.
The many. Yep.
So hope that makes sense. But yeah, good luck for your use of it. I'm exploring Bookings calendars that you block out what's available. Blocking out calendars can be a maintenance nightmare unless you have a recurring block going on, but yes.
So the next one is all about the difference between model apps and Canvas apps. We actually have quite a bit, model-driven apps and Canvas apps. We have quite a bit on this, and there's a couple YouTube videos and some, I think maybe a podcast or two, and probably some blogs. I want to say that I think Mike and Michaela would say model-driven apps are magic, because their comment says, sounds like magic to me. Agreed. I don't really work in that space, but I think my team would definitely agree with you. Yeah.
Continue.
So, yes to what Emma said. Canvas apps are, it's a blank canvas. It's raw. You have this blank canvas of things in these connectors, and you can kind of wire them up and make it look however you want. That is really good in some ways, because I can get this app to look exactly like I want, but it also means it takes longer to do. And it means you have to have some other system that is backing it. So whether or not that be SharePoint, whether or not that be lists, so SharePoint lists or document library, or whether or not that be, Dataverse, or whether or not that be SQL or something else, it has to have something to store the data on the back end. So it's more akin and closer related to custom development, because you have conversations about colors for the things and themes and where, what's the best UX to put a save button and how do I, all of this stuff. Model-driven apps are, I can make a lot of analogies. I don't know what you might be familiar with. If you're familiar with Access, it's like a cloud version of Access. If you're familiar with some other tools, it's really taking that data storage. So what would usually be in SharePoint and moving it into a true database backend, so a relational backend database, and then layering on interfaces that are just quick and easy and simple to create. So model-driven apps are magic. They are the premier low-code, no-code solution. They are the only solution that is not what I would consider to be individual productivity. So Canvas apps are really good for me to maybe do something for myself or customize a little thing in SharePoint or do something else. If you're talking about building something that is actually business critical or important to an organization, model-driven apps is the way I would go. You can layer that on layer a Canvas app on top of a model-driven app to get the best of both worlds. But model-driven app is where every low-code, no-code developer should be moving if this is something that is a real important piece of functionality for an organization. That doesn't mean that I think you should always only ever do model-driven apps. That's not what I'm saying. There's lots of use cases for not doing model-driven apps. However, if your organization is investing in low-code, no-code solutions, model-driven apps is definitely where you should be driving towards. You should be thinking about moving into that that realm.
And I also feel like we've got some videos, like you said, on that.
We do. We have a bunch.
I posted a link.
Okay, sweet.
Yep.
Mitch got us. Cool. I want to go to this Jackie question because I think this is a good one, and I'm actually not super clear on this, so I kind of want to ask Matt. Did they really remove the option to open files in desktop app for all Microsoft 365 accounts, limited to certain levels of subscription? Has working in files in browser or in Teams improved over the last 3 years? I know the second part answer, but I don't know. I have always been able to open everything in desktop app, but I've always had a
yeah, I mean, I don't exactly know. I don't
maybe
exactly
on
know
the individual personal license side, you might not be able to open.
No, even then, if you have a license
should.
if you have a license for the desktop app, you can open them. That's the answer.
Yeah.
If you don't have a license for the desktop app, you cannot open them in desktop. So that is basically the gist of it.
Okay.
They've never removed the ability to open it in a desktop app from a technology perspective. At the same time, there's lots of organizational settings, configurations that could prevent people from opening things in non-managed devices, which is kind of a little bit different thing. It's not a licensing thing. It's I don't trust your device.
I wonder though, I feel like the default changed somewhat recently. Like it used to always open in Teams.
So from a Teams perspective, you have always been able to choose where you want it to the default to be, or right-click on a file and open it where you want. I believe you are correct that the default has changed a year or 2 years ago from the standard default being open instead of open in desktop app to open in browser. Or open in Teams actually is I think what it really does.
Yeah.
But that is a choice, right? Like you can customize which one you want it to do all the time, right?
Yeah. And I actually always open
in app
yep. because I think that's the best experience. However, I will say the open in browser experience I do feel like has gotten better in the last 3 years, and the open in Teams has gotten somewhat better. But in-app, I think, is still premium. It's what I choose to do most of the time. PDF-wise, it doesn't really matter, but it's the PowerPoints and the Word and those types of things. Okay, Jackie, I hope that answers that question. Can you scroll up a little, Mitch? I want to see if there was other... Okay.
We never answered that. I think you did, and I was maybe not paying attention. The Teams had the browser experience has gotten better.
Yeah,
and it's always getting better, right?
Yeah.
But it's never going to be the same
as just working in the desktop.
It's just
app.
never going to be
exactly. The same. Let's see. Is that a channel meeting versus Outlook meeting issue? Do they behave differently when everyone leaves? That might have been a
So when you're an organizer and you say end the meeting, it ends. unless maybe the question is about chat, about whether or not the chat stays open. Your access to chat has everything to do with whether or not the meeting organizer or the meeting allows the chat to be available afterwards. So if you're meeting with an external organization and they don't allow chats after the meeting for external parties, that could be a reason that you lose it. Or if you weren't invited to the meeting, if you were forwarded the meeting and you were never actually invited, that could be another reason why you would maybe lose access to the chat after the meeting or after you leave the meeting. So there's a bunch of like nuance. But generally speaking, if you're dealing with normal meetings, channel or otherwise, where you invite someone to the meeting and they join the meeting and they're in the meeting and they leave the meeting, you should have access to the chat after the meeting.
Yeah. Meetings. Come to my webinar and meetings.
Yeah.
I know they're a necessary evil. I think that meetings can be too much of our week, but at the same time, really important decisions and really important work can be done in collaboration spaces like meetings. So I think there's a place for them. Okay, I think we've gotten through all the other questions.
There's another one down below.
Oh, was there one?
Scroll down a little bit. But we're almost at time too. So.
I know. I think there were more just comments. Oh, yep, on YouTube.
Oh, that's what it was. I see. Never mind.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No, this is great. I'm glad people are responding back with different comments on the topics we're talking about. But I think that we're going to wrap it up because we've only got about 2 minutes left.
Yeah.
Any other hot takes on any of the topics we talked about?
Not that we talked about in particular. I would just encourage everyone to, if you haven't been paying attention, to pay attention to what's going on with Teams and chat and how Microsoft is combining the two. We're probably going to create some content about it. It's a big change. Very interested in know what other people feel about it.
Yeah.
I think it could be good. I've seen a little bit of it now, but it won't roll out to, just so everybody's clear, it won't roll out to everyone probably until the new year. But they've announced it. They've got some documentation out there about it, and people who use Teams and should probably start to get used to it or are familiar with it, I should say.
Yeah. No, it's going to be a big change, but like Matt's saying, we see some positives there. So we'll try to get some content together on our thoughts and get that out on our YouTube channel so y'all can know what we're thinking. Next up, we've got my webinar coming up. I've already mentioned that. We put the link to register. We've got December office hours, so basically a month from now. Hope everyone has a wonderful Thanksgiving in between now and then. And I think really for us, we're thinking through project management and just general work management. So we're offering just a lot of services and products on that track. The other thing that we've mentioned before is our community. This is called the Workplace. It's a digital community where you can join and ask questions, kind of like this. Honestly, it's like office hours,
all the time.
24 hours, 7 days a week. So you can ask questions. We do different hot seats with different community members where you can bring an issue that you're having at your organization and work through it for an hour. Lots of different resources there. So we'll drop a link for the Workplace. Yeah, we are here to help all of you. That's why we exist. That's what our organization's about. So get involved if we can help you. Thanks for joining today. Really fun discussion. As always, we'll see you guys next time.